It all began during their university days. Jide, the natural leader of the group, was the first to meet Babalola, an older enigmatic man with deep ties to ancient occultic practice. Babalola had once been a successful businessman, but his fortune had vanished in an instant, leaving him desperate for a way to rebuild. In his search for power, he has stumbled upon something forbidden, a ritual that promises endless wealth, but at a cost too great for most men to bear. Jide had met Babalola at an upscale club, where the older man had taken interest in his ambition. Over time, Babalola began to reveal his dark knowledge, pulling Jide deeper into his world. It was one night, after several meetings, that Babalola made the offer. "There is a way," he said, his voice low and deliberate. "A way to ensure wealth beyond your wildest dream. But it requires commitment sacrifice," you could say. Jide had been skeptical at first. It all seemed too fantastic, too sinister. But when Babalola showed him his power, how he could bend the very fabric of reality, Jide was convinced. He shared the knowledge with his friends, and together they made a pact that would change their lives forever. The ritual was simple in his demand, but its consequences were dire. Each member of the Brotherhood was required to sleep with a new woman every month. The woman's soul unknowingly bound to their riches. The wealth, Babalola had explained, was drawn from the spiritual energy of those women, sacrificed without their knowledge. Each man, charming and handsome, had no trouble attracting women, innocent, unsuspecting women who became their pawns in the game of power and greed. The path worked. Their businesses flourished overnight. Jide became a real estate mogul. His properties scattered around the most expensive area of Lagos. Kola, with his sharp mind of investments, became a millionaire on the stock market, while Tunde, ever the charmer, turned his nightclub into the hottest spot in town. Rotimi and Femi also rose, building empires that seemed unstoppable. The Brotherhood was thriving, their wealth growing exponentially each month, and with it, their arrogance. As time passed, they revelled in their success, living lavishly without fear. The women they used came and went, none the wiser, each believing they have been part of a fleeting romance or a brief affair with one of Lagos' most eligible bachelors. The Brotherhood's reputation grew, but behind the wealth and glamour was a creeping sense of unease, something none of them could articulate, but felt deep within. Jide was the first to notice the subtle changes. It started with dreams haunting him, vivid nightmares of the women they had seduced. He would wake up in cold sweat. The faces of those women burned his mind, their eyes filled with accusations. He tried to shake it off, dismissing it as guilt, but the dreams persisted, growing more intense with each passing month. "You are thinking too much, Jide," Kola said one evening as they lounged in his penthouse, sipping expensive whiskey. "We've got everything we ever wanted." The guests knew what they were getting into, but Jide wasn't convinced. The women had no idea their souls were being sacrificed for their wealth. The weight of their knowledge was becoming unbearable, but Kola, always the pragmatist, refused to dwell on it. "You can't start feeling sorry for that now," Kola continued, his voice dismissive. "We've got businesses to run, money to make." Tunde, reclining in the leather couch beside them, laughed and shook his head. "Jide, you are too soft. This is the life we choose. No point regretting it." Femi, the youngest and most sensitive of the group, remained silent, He has never really fully embraced the ritual, but he had gone along, seduced by the promise of wealth and the approval of his friends. But now he could feel the darkness growing, the burden of their secret pressing down on him. He had recently met a girl, Amara, who had made him question everything. She was different from the others, kind and gentle, and utterly unaware of the darkness that surrounded him. He found himself falling in love with her, and with that love came a deep sense of guilt. As Femi wrestled with his conscience, Rotimi was facing his own battles. Though outwardly calm and collected, Rotimi had begun to notice strange occurrences in his life. Business deals falling through for no reason, unexplained losses in his accounts, employees quitting without explanation. It was as if the spirits were giving him a warning, though he didn't want to believe it. Things came to a head one evening at a lavish party the Brotherhood had thrown to celebrate their latest success. The penthouse was filled with Lagos elite politicians, celebrities and businessmen. The music was loud, the alcohol flowing freely. Yet, despite the celebration, a sense of dread lingered in the air. Unnoticed by the crowd, but deeply felt by five men, Jide, standing at the window, looked over the city, his heart heavy with the weight of their secret. In that moment, he realized the full extent of what he had done. They had sold their souls, and no amount of wealth could change that. The spirit will come to collect eventually. We can't keep doing this, Jide muttered almost to himself. There is a price we will have to pay. Kola, overhearing him, scoffed. You are overthinking things, man. We are untouchable. But deep down, even Kola knew that wasn't true. Something was coming for them, and it was only a matter of time before the Brotherhood of Wealth would face the consequences of their path. As the night wore on, the party in full swing, none of them realized that their carefully constructed world was beginning to crumble. And when it did, no amount of money would save them. Months had passed since that lavish party, and the atmosphere within the Brotherhood had shifted. The wealth still flowed, but the cost was becoming clearer with each passing day. Jide, the ringleader, was barely holding it together. His once flawless exterior had begun to show cracks, dark circles under his eyes, a constant look of unease, and a growing paranoia. The dreams that had once haunted him only at night now intruded into his waking life. He could see the faces of women they had used, lingering just out to reach, their eyes accusing, their mouths open in silent scream. The other members of the Brotherhood was not faring much better. Tunde, the playboy, had turned to alcohol to draw the growing guilt gnawing at his conscience. Once the life of a party, he now spent most of his nights in a stupor, drowning in fears in expensive whiskey. The women he once charmed so easily no longer brought him the same satisfaction. They were nothing but fleeting distractions, and when they left, the spirit of the women he had used seemed to fill the empty space, their presence oppressive and heavy. Rotimi, ever the practical businessman, had hoped to push through the strange occurrences happening around him, but his business was starting to crumble. He had built an empire, but now these were falling apart without warning. Contracts were Mr. Voided. Even long-standing clients had begun to vanish. At first, he blamed bad luck, but now he knew it was something more. The spirits were tightening their grip, slowly dismantling everything he had worked for. Kola, always the arrogant one, refused to acknowledge the growing dread that surrounded him. His investments were still thriving, and he saw no reason to worry. Yet, even he couldn't ignore the signs forever. His once brilliant mind had begun to falter. Decisions that had once come easier, now clouded by confusion and indecision. He tried to bury himself in luxury, buying cars, throwing parties, surrounding himself with beautiful women. But the weight of their dark secret lingered like a shadow he couldn't escape. But it was Femi, the youngest of the group, who had begun to unravel completely. He had fallen in love with Amara, the girl who had captured his heart and made him question everything about the Brotherhood's way of life. Amara was different from the other women they had used. She was kind, gentle, and genuinely loved Femi for who he was, not for his wealth. Her innocence made Femi's guilt unbearable, and every time he looked into her eyes, he was reminded of the darkness it carried. One evening, unable to take it any longer, Femi invited Amara to his mansion. As they sat in the candlelit living room, he confessed everything: the brotherhood, the ritual, the women they had used, the wealth they had gained at the expense of innocent lives. He left nothing out. Amara listened in stern silence, her eyes in disbelief. When he finished, she slapped him hard across the face, tears streaming down her cheeks. "How could you?" she whispered, her voice trembling with fury and heartbreak. "How could you do something so evil?" Femi couldn't answer. He had once no excuse for what he did. He watched as Femi stormed out of his house, her footsteps echoing in the empty hall. She was gone, and with her, the last bit of Femi had held together. The night, Femi couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned, haunted by the visions of women he had sacrificed. But this time, the dreams were different. The women were not just accusing him, they were coming for him. Their faces, once distant, were now right in front of him. Their hands reaching out, their eyes burning in rage. Femi woke up in a cold sweat, gasping for air, but the room felt suffocating, as if the every walls were closing in on him. He knew what he had to do. He had to end the pact, to free himself from the curse. But when he approached Jide the next day, his plea was met with cold resistance. "There is no way out, Femi," Jide said, his voice hollow, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. "Baba Lola warned us. The spirit don't let anyone live alive." "I don't care," Femi shot back. "I can't live like this anymore. I have lost Amara, and I'm not about to lose my soul too." Lounging in an armchair nearby, scoffed. "You are being dramatic, Femi. We've all had been having fun. We are rich beyond measure. So what if you men had to pay the price?" Femi glared at him. "You don't understand. This isn't just about money anymore. We have condemned those women so. And for what? Our lives are even falling apart, in case you have not noticed." Tunde slouched on the couch with a bottle of whiskey in hand, muttered, "He is right. We are not in control anymore. The spirits are." The room fell silent as Tunde's words sank in. The reality that they had been avoiding was finally catching up with them. That evening, Femi, desperate attempt to reach Baba Lola, hoping the older man could offer a solution. He drove to the old man's secluded mansion, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and desperation. When he arrived, Babalola was waiting for him, sitting in the dimly lit parlor, as he had expected Femi all along. "You want to end the pact," Babalola said without preamble, his voice eerily calm. "You want to be free." "Yes," Femi replied, his voice shaking. "I can't keep doing this. There has to be a way out." Babalola chuckled and smiled softly, a sound that sent a chill down Femi's spine. There is no way out, my boy. The spirit owns you now. You made a deal and they will collect their due. You should have known this from the start. Femi's heart sank. He had hoped Babalola would have a solution, some way to break the curse, but the old man's words were final. There was no escape. You can run, you can hide, Babalola continued, his eyes gleaming in the dim light. But the spirit will find you. They always do. Femi left Babalola's mansion that night, his mind racing, his soul heavy with dread. He knew that there was no way out. The Brotherhood had sealed their fate the moment they made the pact, and now the spirits were coming to collect. Meanwhile, back in Lagos, the other members of the Brotherhood were beginning to feel the full weight of the curse. Jide's nightmare had become so intense that he could no longer distinguish between dream and reality. He would see the women's faces everywhere, in mirrors, in shadows, even in the faces of strangers on the streets. His once thriving real estate empire was crumbling, deals falling apart for no reason, properties losing values overnight. Kola too was beginning to unravel. At a high-profile investment meeting, he had a panic attack, something that had never happened to him before. His confidence, once unshaken, was now crumbling. He had started to hear whispers, soft, insistent voices that he couldn't escape, no matter where he went to. Tunde's descent was the most dramatic. One night, after yet another failed attempt to drown his sorrows in alcohol, he drove his car at full speed towards the ocean. He wanted to end it all, to escape the spirit's wrath. But as he approached the water, something stopped him. It wasn't a physical force, but a presence, a dark, cold presence that filled the car. Whispering in his ear, Tunde lost control of the vehicle, crashing into a ditch. He survived, but the message was clear. There was no escape. The Brotherhood of Worlds was unraveling. The spirits were closing in. They had taken everything the men held dear, and soon they would soon come for their souls. The Brotherhood Empire was quite crumbling fast than any of them could have predicted. Jide, once the confident leader, now wandered his mansion like a haunted man. He barely left his home, consumed by paranoia, always looking over his shoulder, as if the spirits were lurking behind every door. The faces of the women he had used stared back at him, very reflective surface, mirror shattered as soon as he walked by, and his once grand home had become a tomb, filling with remnants of his guilt. Rotimi had completely withdrawn from public life, his business empire in ruins. His mansion was repossessed, and his wealth had vanished, as if it never existed. He became a recluse, moving into a small apartment in a rundown part of town. Every night, the same women appeared in his dream, those he had unknowingly sacrificed, and now they spoke to him in whispers. These words carrying promises of vengeance. He tried to ignore them, but their voices grew louder, tormenting him until he was on the verge of madness. Kola's fall was swifter and cruel. One day, while meeting with investor for what should have been the most lucrative deal of his life, he lost control. The whispers in his head became too much. He stood in the middle of the boardroom, yelling at voices no one could hear, tearing at his most expensive suit as he has tried to drown out the cacophony. The investors watched in shock as Kola, the once golden boy of Lagos investment scene, collapsed to the floor in a fit of madness. Security had to escort him out, and soon the news spread. Kola was finished. His wealth, reputation, everything he had built was gone. Tunde, still reeling from his near-death experience, had sunk into a depression. He refused to leave his home, drinking himself into oblivion each night. The spirits were no longer just in his dream. They had invaded his reality also. He could see them standing at the foot of his bed, their eyes glowing with hatred. He tried to call Jide, Femi, anyone who would listen to him, but no one picked up. It was as if they all had vanished into darkness they had created. Femi, the youngest, had been the only one to make an attempt to redemption. After Amara had left him, he sought out Babalola once more, hoping beyond hope that there was something he could do to undo the pact. But Babalola's mansion, once grand and foreboding, was now abandoned, his windows shattered, the garden overgrown with weeds. It was as if the old man had never existed. Desperate, Femi sought out local spiritualists and traditional healers, begging for a way to cleanse his soul, to escape the curse. But every healer gave him the same response. There was no escape from the spirit. The only way to survive was to accept his fate. As the months dragged on, it became clear that the Brotherhood had been truly forsaken. The wealth they had once flaunted had been stripped away, piece by piece, until all that remained were 5 broken men, living in fear of the spirit they had invoked. But the final blow was yet to come. One night, as the full moon hung low in the sky, Jide received a call from an unknown number. His hand shook as he answered. The fear gripped so tightly that he barely breathed. The voice on the other end was soft, feminine and familiar. "It's time, Jide," the voice said. "We are coming for you." Jide dropped the phone, his heart racing. He knew without a doubt it was the spirit. The women whose souls had been sacrificed for his wealth. The reckoning has finally arrived. At the same time, across the city, the other members of the Brotherhood received similar calls. Each man, no matter where they were, felt the weight of the spirit closing in on them. That night seems to stretch on endlessly, the air heavy with impending doom. There was no more running, no more hiding. The spirit had come to collect. It was Tunde who cracked first. In the early hours of the morning, his neighbors heard him scream, echoing through the walls of the mansion. When the police arrived, they found Tunde in his bedroom, the walls covered frantically, scribbled message warnings and pleas for mercy. But Tunde himself was gone. His body slumped on the floor, his eyes wide open, frozen in a look of sheer terror. The cause of death was not determined, but none of them wanted to know the truth because those who knew the truth understood. The spirit had claimed him. Rotimi was next. His body was found in the bathtub of his dingy apartment, the water stained red with his blood. He had slashed his wrist in a desperate attempt to escape the torment, but even in death, the spirit could not release him. His eyes too were wide open, as if he had seen something in his final moment, something that had terrified him so very well, to the very core. Collar's end was perhaps the most tragic. His once brilliant mind had deteriorated into madness, and he was found wandering the streets, disheveled and muttering to himself about the spirit, about wealth, and about "there have been fools." When he had finally picked up by the police, he was taken to a psychiatric hospital, where he spent the remaining of his life in a padded cell, his mind completely broken. Jide, the leader of the Brotherhood, knew his time was coming. The night after Tunde's death, he sat in the middle of his grand living room, the walls closing in around him. He could hear the whispers, feeling the cold presence of the spirits as they drew closer. There was no escape. He had sealed his fate. That moment, after the fate was sealed, he made the pact with Babalola, and now there was nothing left but to wait. On the dead of the night, as the wind howled outside his mansion, the spirits came for Jide. No one knew what exactly happened that night, but when the housekeeper arrived the next morning, she found Jide's lifeless body sitting upright in his favorite chair, his face twisted in a grotesque expression of fear. The mansion, once the epitome of luxury, now felt cold and lifeless. a tomb for the man who had once believed he could outsmart the forces of the spiritual world. Femi was the last to fall. He had tried to flee Lagos, hoping to outrun the spirit, but there was no escaping them. In a remote village, far from the city, he was found dead in a small decrepit motel. The locals spoke of strange occurrences that night, lights flickering, the sound of whispers carried on the wind, and the overwhelming sense that something dark has passed through the village. And so, the Brotherhood of Wealth was no more. 5 young men who had once ruled the city with their charm, power, and wealth were now nothing but a cautionary tale, whispered about in the streets of Lagos. They had gained everything they ever wanted, but in the end, they lost what matters most, their souls. The spirits, bonded by their ancient laws, had collected their dues, and the city of Lagos moved on, unaware of the darkness that once festered beneath its glittering surface. The wealth had been gained through deceit, manipulations, and sacrifice had vanished, leaving nothing but the memory of the Brotherhood's fall. A chilling reminder that some prices are too high to pay. Moral lesson of this story: shortcuts to success, especially those achieved through immoral and harmful means, come with devastating consequences. Greed, exploitation, and disregard for others can lead to self-destruction. No amount of wealth and power can protect one from the repercussion of unethical actions. No one can escape accountability for their deeds. The end.